Hey folks, we have a really interesting show today. So Cassandra is one of our club members and she grows killifish. Killifish are her thing and she loves to raise them, but something that's really essential to that is growing live food, and she has all kinds of interesting food cultures that she's always bringing around for club meetings and stuff, and has very graciously offered to show us around and show us how she does things. Take a look.
All right, would you mind introducing yourself?
So my name's Cassandra Nelson. I've been keeping fish since I was a toddler with a goldfish in a bowl. I got my first community tank when I was 8 years old. My dad and I had that 10-gallon tank that's actually in the corner right now. It's the same exact tank, same stand and everything. And that's where I learned all of my mistakes and bad things to do. I started keeping this tank when I was in my early 20s, and that's when I joined my local Killifish chapter. It's MAKA, the Metropolitan Area Killifish Association. And I started breeding killies and got into live foods and got into plants, and it all kind of cascaded from there.
So are live foods sort of part and parcel with keeping killifish and like fish that you'd raise that way?
They are, yeah. Killifish are micro predators for the most part. They don't usually take very well to prepared foods or dry foods, flake foods. They will eventually, but it's much better for them. They're much more adapted to just eating live foods. The fry in particular, most people who keep killies breed them because a lot of the killifish don't really live for very long. So in order to keep the population, you have to keep breeding constantly. And when you breed, most of the fry are too small for most foods you can buy. Even baby brine shrimp you can buy frozen at the store. They're too small to eat baby brine shrimp. So I had to start keeping things like microworms and vinegar eels and learning how to create green water, growing infusoria and paramecium, things like that. And it just kind of cascaded into other foods that are easy to keep.
So I've heard Rachel Leary describe killifish, or she was talking, I think, about rams when we were talking, but she described them as annuals, so they only live, or in the wild at least, would only live for about a year or so. Is that kind of how it is with a lot of what you collect?
There are two main types of killifish, I would say. One is what you call an annual. That means that they have a very short lifespan, especially in the wild. And then we have non-annual killifish, and those live a little bit longer. And it really just depends on what part of the world they evolved in. So places that have a short wet season and a long dry season, usually that's where you'll find the non-annual killies. They'll live maybe a few months in the wild. In captivity, a year, maybe a little bit longer. I've never personally had an annual killifish that lived longer than a year.
And do they come in the mail? Like, do you usually get them like eggs in the mail and stuff?
Sure. So you can get eggs in the mail because of how they evolved. You actually have to, with the annual species at least, you have to dry out the eggs or keep them on a kind of a moist medium, like a coconut coir or peat moss or something similar. And that's how I get a lot of the eggs. But I've also gotten several species. These ones you can't really see in here, but the Aphyosemium striatum that I keep, I got as adult pairs, and they'll actually live for maybe 3 to 5 years in the aquarium. They are a non-annual.
Are there clubs here in Tennessee for this sort of thing, or is this just what you have imported from other places?
Oh, they're mostly imported from overseas. There are a lot of people in Europe that breed these fish, but there is a countrywide killifish organization, the AKA, that I'm a member of, and I speak to other members, and we kind of trade fish back and forth or eggs back and forth.
So what are the main types of live food that you raise, and maybe in order of ease of use and common? Like, what's the most common to the least common?
So the most common for killifish keepers, at least, would probably be grindleworms. I don't know anybody who keeps killifish or breeds killifish who doesn't have grindleworms. They're very easy food, and they're an appropriate size for both adult and baby fish. As the baby fish get a little bit bigger, you can start feeding them grindleworms too.
And what's the next what after grindleworms? What would you say?
Probably microworms. I personally don't keep microworms. I keep something very similar. They're called banana worms. Banana worms are slightly smaller than microworms. Then you've got Walter worms that are also in the same category. They're all the same species of nematode.
And what's beyond that?
So beyond that, I also keep Daphnia magna, Daphnia pulex, Cereodaphnia, scuds, white worms, and vinegar eels.
So why so many different types? Is there some fish that only eat a particular type, or is it just for variety in general?
The ones that I have are mostly for variety. My fish will eat pretty much any of those foods. The smaller fish don't take to the scuds very well unless I scoop out specifically smaller scuds. They can get a little bit too big for some of the smaller fish. But it's mostly just for nutritional variety. I don't like feeding any one food more than once a day. I won't feed the same food twice in a row.
So, is it difficult to keep such a wide variety of creatures alive? I mean, isn't it? It's kind of like a hobby, like the side hobby of your hobby.
Yeah, for sure. It can be time consuming, or it could not be. It really depends on the level of effort you want to put into it, right? So I will spend maybe about 15 or 20 minutes every other day going through all of my cultures, making sure they're properly fed and whatever other maintenance I need to do on them.
Would you say that your collection is typical, or are you an outlier?
I wouldn't say I'm really an outlier, but I'm aware that I keep a wider variety of live foods than most people do.
It's really interesting, and I guess for these particular fish, it's essential. Like, they won't eat other things.
I mean, they will eat flake food if they're like starving and that's all you offer to them, but they don't like it. And I mean, why not give them something more natural? When you feed live foods, you will notice a huge difference. If your fish have only eaten prepared foods or dry foods, flake foods their entire life, if you start feeding live foods, you will see activity, breeding, and colors that you have never seen before.
What's the best place to start? And would you recommend? Let's say you didn't want to keep 30 different kinds of live food. If you kept 2 kinds, would that be sufficient? Or
Yeah, in the past, I've gotten away with just keeping grindleworms, and then I'll rotate out with frozen foods on other days.
is some of it seasonal? Like, it's easier to grow them or to keep them in certain times of the year?
Yeah, for sure. We'll check out a little bit later. We'll check out my outdoor cultures, but I keep several outdoor cultures where I don't want to call it culturing, but I have mosquito larvae and seed shrimp ostracods, and they're kind of seasonal. In the winter time, obviously the mosquito larvae drop off and the ostracods will take over the cultures. And in the summer, it's the opposite. The seed shrimp will die off and the mosquito larvae will take over the cultures.
All right, so you're going to give us a little bit of a tour of what you got going on, your cultures and stuff, and we're going to get up out of our nice, comfortable seat and have a look around.
Perfect.
Your gold mine?
Yes. Years and years ago, when my grandparents owned this place, they kept a horse for a neighbor of theirs who lived down the road. And my grandfather got this little, I don't know what you want to call it, he got it as to be a watering trough.
Yeah, it's like a little trough.
And when the house went into disrepair and the horse went back to its owner, it got left here. So mosquito larvae, just mosquitoes. Seed shrimp are ostracods. They're tiny little crustaceans. They're very hard shelled. You can actually see, you can kind of see them right here. They're these little, well, you can't see them when they're in my hand. They're these little teeny dots. You can see these little tiny dots just kind of swirling around.
Yeah.
A lot of fish won't eat them, but killies will, because if you look really, really close at their Their mouths, if you zoom in or get a magnified picture, they've got these tiny little jagged teeth like sharks almost.
Huh.
They can crunch right through those shells. But a lot of other fish, like guppies and stuff, won't really eat them.
For like micro crustaceans and stuff.
Yeah.
How interesting. And you don't ever put fish in there.
No, that's just for food.
It's just for them to grow.
Yes.
Okay. Huh. So what's you got going in this big tub?
In this big tub is currently nothing because the tub, when I got it out of the box, started leaking. The company's going to replace it, and when they do, it will be for Daphnia magna.
Really? This whole tub for Daphnia?
The whole tub. So I'm going to do Daphnia in it, and I will probably co-culture with scuds on the bottom. Those scuds will co-culture very well with Daphnia.
So they run along the bottom and the Daphnia sticks to the top.
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow.
I think if we look...
How many gallons is that?
This is about a little over 1,000 gallons. And we've got my friend Fred floating around on the...
Oh, the Fred the Frog?
Yeah. I put him in there earlier because the cats were chasing him around. He seems to like it.
Do they swim or is he trapped?
He was swimming around earlier. I think he just
Oh,
got
cool.
up there because he wanted to rest.
Are these all things too?
These are all cultures.
What's that?
So most of these are new cultures. This one is for scuds. You probably won't be able to see any in here, but there are plenty of mosquito larvae because I forgot to go out and get mosquito dunks, but actually you can see if they don't, they'll probably skitter away once I do this. Yeah, there were some scuds over here. They're in there. You can take my word for it.
Yeah.
They're in there somewhere.
Do you ever like end up with like other wild creatures that just kind of come out of nowhere, or fish that were eggs on plants that you put in? Or?
The only thing I've gotten is aphids. I got the water hyacinth there came with aphids all over them.
Oh no.
Yeah. These two are for Daphnia magna. You might be able to see them in here. You probably can't see these. These are Cereodaphnia. Nope. You can just see the mosquito larvae. Cereodaphnia are way too small. But I've got other cultures I can show you upstairs.
So how do you pull them out of here? Like,
I use a baby brine shrimp net. You can just pick
The
it up
little
at pretty
white
much
nets.
yeah, pretty much any local fish store will have them.
okay. And you just scoop it out and then what? Rinse it off into another container?
I
or-
don't bother rinsing them off. I'll just I'll scoop it out and then I'll just dip it into the tank.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So how often do you harvest these things?
I'll harvest maybe 2 or 3 times a week, depending on the culture.
So it's
And-
become part of your routine to go around and gather stuff from the different cultures. And
Yeah, like I said earlier, I try to not feed the same food more than once in a back to back or whatever. So, one day I'll go out to the woods and I'll get the mosquito larvae. The next day I'll come out here and I'll get some Daphnia. The next day I'll feed some white worms. And the day after that, maybe some grindle worms. Just kind of change it up, keep some variety. It's a culture that I've had set up for quite some time. And it is filled with Daphnia pulex. Like, filled. I don't know if the lighting is conducive, but you can see them everywhere here.
oh yeah, look at that.
I'll need to start harvesting these pretty regularly now that it's like this. And what I'll do is either I'll give them away at the fish club meetings or I'll start to freeze them.
Do you freeze them in those little trays?
Yeah, and just little silicone trays make Daphnia ice cubes.
Is it the same thing in this little thing?
These are Cereodaphnia, and these ones are not quite as dense yet. You can see a lot of mosquito larvae in here, but the Cereodaphnia are very, very small. You can kind of see them against the wall, right over there. Little teeny dots. They're about the size of baby brine shrimp. So this is another bin where I keep scuds, but because I wanted to experiment with co-culturing, I also seeded this with Cereodaphnia. And you can see the little teeny dots. I don't know how the glare looks. right there. But the little teeny dots that are swimming around everywhere, those are Daphnia.
Okay.
And it looks like we had a mosquito or two wander in there.
What do you do to maintain it?
On the scud cultures and the Daphnia cultures, all I will do is about a 50% water change once a week. If you're culturing Daphnia just by themselves, there's a couple different ways to do it. But if you're looking for just an easy, low maintenance, no maintenance culture, you can just fill it with leaf litter. And as the leaves break down, the Daphnia will graze off of whatever bacteria and whatnot builds up on there. And the scuds themselves are detritivores, so they eat the dead leaves and dead wood and whatever else.
Well, stuff growing in buckets makes a lot of sense, but tell me about these bins.
So, we'll start over here. These are all the grindle worms. Let's take a good one here. This is a traditional grindle worm culture. I've got vents cut out on the top for air, and I just taped in some coffee filter so that if you don't do that, they will attract gnats, and you'll get gnat larvae, and you'll open it up and a big swarm of flies will come at you.
Yeah, those terrarium gnats, I've noticed.
I hate those things. But these are grindle worms.
So is the white stuff the worm?
Yeah, these little white things, these are worms.
Oh, I see them. Look at that. And is that how you pull them out? You just kind of scrape them off the side, or?
So it depends. You can do that. You can scrape them off the side, and you can just plop them in the tank here. And they'll live in the tank for at least a few hours, maybe a couple days, depending on how well oxygenated it is. Or what you can do is you can use these. I think they're crochet canvas. I think it's what it's technically called. They sell this kind of stuff at Walmart in the hobby section.
Oh yeah.
But it's just like this plastic grid, and what I do is I just lay this over the culture, over on top of the food, and the worms, you can kind of see, will crawl all over it. And I can just take this off, and I can just dip this into the tank.
Oh, how smart.
And that's a lot easier than trying to wipe them off the sides or whatever.
It looks like a little dish sponge under.
Yeah, so this is a new type of culture method that I've been trying out, and it's working very, very well. Usually grindle worms are cultured in a soil media, or coco coir, or a peat moss media. But this, like you said, it's just a scouring pad. I got it a little damp, and that's it. It takes pretty much care of itself. About once a month or so, I'll take one of the sponges out, rinse it underwater, and then just plop it back in.
Wow. All right, what else?
So over here, we've got banana worms. They're in the same family as microworms and Walter worms. I'm not sure which of these is going really well right now. Here we go. These are cultured on an oatmeal media. You can use potato flakes as well, but I find they do best with the oatmeal. And these are super tiny. You can, all of this stuff, all over the sides, these are all worms. They're technically nematodes.
Really?
Yes, but if you want to take a look here, so I plop these inside the tank, you can see the
Oh, you can definitely
hundreds of
see.
teeny tiny little worms. These are perfect for baby fish. They're packed full of nutrients.
Could these be too small for some fish?
For sure. In the tank that I put it in, there's one adolescent fish. He's not quite an adult yet, but he mostly ignores it because they're just a little bit too small for him. But as you can see, one of these little bins will probably produce enough for an entire fish room.
Wow.
I keep multiple cultures because they do crash occasionally. It's always good to have a backup.
So that's on oatmeal, and it's just in your living room. Is there a temperature requirement or anything for that?
The microworms, banana worms, and the grindle worms will do just fine at room temperature. The only thing that I keep that has a specific temperature requirement would be the white worms. The white worms need to be kept cooler than 65 degrees, ideally between about 50 and 60. So I have a wine fridge that I bought specifically for growing worms in.
Wow.
The banana worms, the culture will break down after time. This is one that I just started. Oh, you might not be able to see too many worms, and you can kind of see the surface as it writhes around right there. There are definitely a good population of worms in here. But as time goes on, they will break down the media, and it'll become soupy over time. They'll become a little bit darker, and that's when you know the culture is crashing. See, this is basically liquid.
So that's a crashed culture.
This is crashed. It's not. It'll turn black when it's really bad, but this is barely producing. You can see just a little small amount of worms over here, and that's it.
So you just like rinse it out and start over. Huh?
Exactly, and just throw this out. Put new media in there, new oatmeal in there, a little bit of water, a little bit of yeast. The banana worms will actually eat the bacteria produced by the yeast. So as the yeast eats the oatmeal, they'll produce waste, and other bacteria will form, and the banana worms will eat that.
And tell me about your Molotov cocktails.
These are the easiest live food cultures in the world. Vinegar eels, they're also a type of nematode. They are the smallest live food that I keep. And this is a mixture of apple cider vinegar and water. It's a 50-50 mixture. Some people put apple slices in the culture. I've found that they do just fine without it.
What's that at the bottom?
This is just poop, basically.
Oh.
It's stuff that collects on the bottom. I think some people will call it mother or whatever. This is the organic substance that forms in organic vinegar, apple cider vinegar.
Okay. How neat.
Yes. I've kept these traditional cultures for a long time, and they produce fairly well. I'll generally keep about 2 or 3 for the fish room, and to harvest them is kind of tricky. They'll climb up the sides a little bit, and you can wipe that off with your finger or with a Q-tip or something, or you can take the cotton balls. I have the cotton balls in there so they don't get infested with flies again. But you can take the cotton balls and kind of stick them down in the neck here, and then fill the top with fresh water. And what'll happen is the vinegar eels will swim up through the cotton ball and collect in the fresh water. And you can just siphon off the fresh water full of eels and drop that in the tank.
Oh, like a little sucker or pipette or something?
Yeah, I just use a little pipette. But what I've been experimenting with lately is kind of a new fad, I guess you'd call it, within the live food
live food fad.
These, it looks very similar to the banana worm cultures because it's basically the same thing. You can probably smell it a little bit. This is oatmeal with diluted vinegar, apple cider vinegar, and this is for ease of harvesting, and you also get a little bit better production. But these are also just vinegar eels. It's the same thing as that I have in the
it's funny.
wine bottles.
It looks like something you like with hydrogen peroxide poured on it. Like it's bubbling, but those are just little bodies.
Yep.
All moving around over there.
Hundreds of thousands or millions or however many is in there.
Lots and lots.
Lots and lots for sure. This is the most dense scud culture I have. It's not very dense at the moment, but you'll be able to see them kind of swimming around in here. Let's see if I disturb this. Oh, actually you can kind of see one. I've got a little piece of kale stem in here. There goes one swimming around.
Oh, it looks like a shrimp.
That's right.
Oh, I see a couple of them over here.
There you go. They're freshwater amphipods, crustaceans, so they're kind of similar to shrimp.
I've never really seen one before. I've heard people talk about them a lot.
Yeah. And the tiny dots in there is Cereodaphnia.
So
I co-culture the Cereodaphnia in there as well.
How interesting. And they love those leaves. I guess they're eating the
Yeah.
stuff off the...
They just, hi Link, this is Link.
just joined you. How neat. So do they eat the leaves themselves or things that off the leaves?
They will eat the leaves themselves. They'll eat pretty much anything that you throw in there. Any kind of vegetables, fruits, leaves, little bits of wood. They're a great part of a cleanup crew. If you want them in your fish tank or in your pond or whatever. If they start to starve, they are known for eating plants. So I try not to establish them in a planted tank, but if you just throw some leaf litter or some blanched vegetables in a container, they'll do fine. They'll take care of themselves.
Wow. Cool. So this is your white worm fridge.
This is my white worm fridge. And this is a dirt culture of white worms that crashed. Here's my temperature gauge. You see we're sitting at about 52 degrees right now. And these two cultures are on scouring pad media. And then this one, I call this my mother culture. So when I have to start something new, or when I want to give stuff away at the fish club meetings, I will take it directly from here. And at first, it doesn't look like there's much going on.
I see a couple of things moving around. Oh, wow. All those little white guys.
So there's a very large population of worms in here. They just don't like to come up to the surface so much. I found that they are averse to light.
Oh, okay.
So if you stand here and shine a light on them, you'll see them all dive down into the dirt. But for ease of collection, and also as a kind of an easier, low maintenance media, I've started to experiment with scouring pads. Again, just like the grindle worms, these are just scouring pads that you can buy at the grocery store. And there's some food on top that's kind of molded over.
Huh.
They don't mind the mold.
Wow.
Yeah,
You just like run your finger around to get them?
you just run your finger around the side and pick them up. And this culture is, it's going pretty well, but it's not quite producing as much as I would like right now. Like I said, every time I get live cultures, I just split them and split them and split them so I can have a nice big population and give a bunch away to the club and everything. So these are actually still getting established. But it's a pretty good population. You can see I've got the same
the mesh.
Canvas mesh here.
What's that on top of it? Is that oatmeal stuff or?
This is actually underneath it. This is the food that I feed them. So I've experimented with a lot of different foods for these cultures in particular. A common food is like a kibble, like a dried dog food or dried cat food.
Uh-huh.
A lot of people feed that, and you can have good success with that. For white worms, a lot of people will take bread and coat the bread with yogurt and then sprinkle activated yeast on top of that. And that's a great food for them. But what I've started to do is take dried out pieces of bread and I'll crumble it up into breadcrumbs. And then I'll add the activated yeast, and I switched from yogurt to kefir. And that combination, kind of like in a slurry, I'll show you, I've got some in the fridge, but that combination has done wonders, not only for the white worms, but for the grindle worms as well. The grindle worms love it. Those cultures that we saw earlier had crashed about 3 weeks ago, and there were barely any worms in there. And, I mean, you saw the population, it's pretty sizable at this point, enough to harvest, enough to split the culture at least. So this is it. This is, like I said, it's just breadcrumbs. Dried out pieces of bread smushed up into breadcrumbs with activated yeast mixed in, and kefir, which is very similar to yogurt, but a little bit more nutritious, I think.
And very fun to say.
Yes.
Kefir.
Thank you so much for talking to me today. I had a lot of fun looking around, and I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us.
Me too. Thanks for coming over.
Tell you what, it's always handy just to have a tank that's just like full of plants. You know, it's just like you're not trying to aquascape it. You're not trying to.
It was aquascaped. And then the guppy grass took over, and the Vallisneria started going everywhere, and I threw shrimp in
Well,
there.
like, yeah, you've obviously planted it, and I'm sure at some point there was a scheme to it. Now it's like Shrimp Town. Hey folks, thanks for watching. Take a few moments to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know if you like video in this format. I'm always trying new things, and it's always fun to see what people like and what people don't like. But that's not all for me. I'll be back again with more videos. Until next time, follow your bliss, keep a clean tank, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.